Hi, picture trees. It's Thanksgiving week 2025. Families are packaged into movie theaters across the world. Popcorns is being passaged around. Kids are being intercities and parents are scrolling through train phones. I think for something fun, but less to watch overthink for and your and 48 minutes. Subscribes.
What they get instead is a story about gentrification, historical erasure, propaganda, colonial theft, and the courage it takes to tell the truth when the entire system is designed to bury it. Welcome back to Zootopia. Almost a decade after the original 2016 film won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, Disney returned to one of its most beloved universes with Zootopia 2, directed once again by Jared Bush and Byron Howard. The sequel arrived on November 26, 2025, e became an immediate cultural event, earning over $556 million globally on its opening weekend alone. Within 48 hours of release, it had already made back 130% of its $150 million production budget. The numbers are staggering. But numbers alone never tell the whole story. What we are going to do today is something a little different. We are not just going to talk about whether Zootopia 2 is a good movie, though we will absolutely get into that. We are going to dissect it. We are going to pull apart its narrative threads, its immediate social commentary, hold its characters up to the light, interrogate its storytelling choices, and ask the bigger question that every piece. The original Zootopia released in 2016 was, in the most sincere sense of the word, a phenomenon. It was not supposed to be a complex film. On the surface, it was a buddy cop animated movie about a bunny in a fuchsia city of anthropomorphic animals. But beneath the colorful surface was one of the sharpest, most emotionally resonant critiques of systemic bias, institutional prejudice, and the way fear is weaponized for political control at Maine. Judy Hopps, the ego bunny police officer, had to confront the fact that she herself held prejudices about Nick Wilde, the fox, even as she fought for justice. Each was nuanced, each was brave, each was unexpectedly brilliant. And so when Disney announced that a sequel was in development officially confirmed in February 2023, with a release date set for November 2025, the expectations were astronomical. 9 years is a long time to wait. Audiences had grown up with the characters. The themes of the original had only become more relevant as the world moved through tumultuous years of social upheaval, political polarization, and cultural reckoning. The bar was impossibly high. The question was simple: could Zootopia 2's rise still meet it? The answer, as we will explore in detail, is mostly yes, sometimes gloriously, occasionally frustratingly, and always interestingly. Let us begin at the beginning, because the plot of Zootopia 2 is genuinely layered and deserves to be walked through carefully before we start peeling it apart for deeper meaning. The film picks up almost immediately after the events of the first movie. Judy Hopps is still voiced by Jennifer Goodwin with that same infectious, relentless optimism. Nick Wilde is still voiced by Jason Bateman with that perfectly calibrated dry wit. Ari now officially partners in the Zootopia Police Department. They have cracked the biggest Kazinzipede history, exposing male bellwether S conspiracy to drive Predator Savage, and they are ready for their next adventure. But something is off between them. The partnership is new, the chemistry is still electric, but their communication styles are creating friction. Judy charges E with enthusiasm. Nick holds back with caution. These are not merely comedic differences. They reflect deeper psychological patterns that the film will eventually force both characters to confront. The filmmakers set this tension up early and let it simmer all the way through till the climax, which is smart structural storytelling. The inciting incident arrives fast. During a routine car chase, Judy discovers something that should not exist in Zootopia's skin. A literal piece of shed snake skin left behind in the vehicle of a suspect. This is remarkable for one specific reason: there are no snakes in Zootopia. In fact, as the film gradually reveals to us, there are no reptiles of any kind in the city. No lizards, no crocodiles, no turtles, nothing with scales. The city, for all its proud motto of anyone can be anything, has quietly, systematically excluded an entire category of animals. The Disneyski leads Judy though a rabbit hole pun absolutely entende. The snake's name is Gary the Snake, voiced with tremendous warmth and vulnerability by Oscar winner Ke Huy Quan. Gary is a pit viper, and his presence in Zootopia is not accidental. He is there for a reason. He is searching for justice, specifically for the restoration of his family's name and the recognition of his great-grandmother Agnes G. Snake as the true founder of Zootopia's revolutionary weather. The weather walls, if you recall from the first film, added the extraordinary engineering systems that allow Zootopia to maintain different climate zones within the same city: the sun-baked Sahara Square, the frozen Tundra Zone, the lush rainforest district. These walls added the reason the city can house such a diverse population of animals from wildly different environments. They added the literal foundation of Zootopia's diversity. The film reveals that this technology was not invented by the Linksley family, the aristocratic founding family who have taken credit for it for generations. It was invented by Agnes G. Snake, a reptile, whose work was stolen, whose people were demonized and expelled, and whose very name was erased from the historical record. This is the engine of the film. Everything else spins out from the central revelation. Gary is initially presented as a suspicious figure, a wanted reptile, a snake in every sense of the word that the mammals of Zootopia have been conditioned to fear. Judy and Nick begin the story chasing him. But as they dig deeper, they realize that the real criminals are the ones who have been celebrated as heroes. The Linksley family, led by a patriarch whose wealth and status rest entirely on a stolen legacy, is the true antagonist. The film's villain is not a scary predator. The villain is an establishment family protecting its stolen privilege. And then there is Palbert, the awkward, seemingly harmless young member of the Linksley family who befriends Judy and Gary, appearing to be an ally before revealing himself to be the most personally dangerous threat of all. He poisons Judy with snake venom. He attempts to silence Gary. He nearly kills Nibbles. His betrayal is the film's most emotionally devastating moment. Each works because the filmmakers took the time to make us actually trust him. In the end, the truth comes out. The Linksleys are arrested. Chief Bogle recovers from injuries sustained during the chaos. Gary throws a party as his great-grandmother's name is finally restored to the historical record as Zootopia's true founding genius. The city opens its borders to reptiles. And Judy and Nick, having fought through their own interpersonal tensions alongside the sextonal crisis, emerged with a partnership that is stronger, more honest, and more deeply felt than before. Roll credits. Brain tissues. It is where things get genuinely fascinating, and also where the film's ambitions reveal both its greatest triumphs and its occasional stumbles. Zootopia 2 is not subtle. Let us say that clearly and without apology. This is a film that has decided it wants still talk about gentrification, colonial erasure, propaganda, systemic racism, and the way institutions protect the powerful at the expense of the marginalized. Each is going to do so using animated animals and a colorful city. If you are looking for subtlety, you have come to the wrong movie theater. But subtlety is not always a virtue, and this film seems to understand that. Let us start with the most immediately striking theme, the erasure of reptiles from Zootopia's history in society. The backstory is this: centuries ago, reptiles were part of Zootopia. They lived in a neighborhood called Reptile Ravine. They contributed to the city, they had culture, they had ideas, and crucially they had a genius among them, Agnes G. Snake, whose engineering brilliance made the entire Zootopia ecosystem possible. Then came an incident. A snake bit a tortoise, or at least, that is what the official history says. The details, as with all convenient historical narratives that justify oppression, are murky and disputed. What matters is that this single alleged incident was seized upon by the Linksley Patriarch as a pretext to demonize all reptiles collectively. Every snake, every lizard, every crocodile became dangerous by association. The fear spread. The propaganda worked. The reptiles were forced out. Their neighborhood was taken. Their contributions were stolen. Their very existence in the city's founding story was eliminated. If that sounds familiar, it should. It is the basic narrative of colonialism. It is the story of indigenous displacement. It is the pattern that has repeated itself across human history in virtually every corner of the planet. Take a community, manufacture a fear, use that fear to justify taking their land and resources, write them out of the history books, and then pass the stolen wealth down through generations as legitimate. The film draws these parallels explicitly enough that multiple critics and cultural commentators noted the connections in their reviews. One analysis described the Linksley family's behavior as indicative of colonizer behavior, comparing the demonization of reptiles to the way European settlers branded indigenous peoples as savage threats to justify conquest. Another piece drew a direct line to the concept of settler colonialism in the way that oppressor groups frequently label resistance as violence and peace as passivity until they have consolidated NO. What makes this particularly bold for a Disney film, this is worth pausing on, is that the villain is not a frightening outsider. The villain is the established, wealthy, respected family at the center of the city's civic life. The villain has a plaque on a building. The villain gives speeches at centennial galas. The villain is the establishment. This is a meaningfully different kind of antagonist than audiences usually encounter in family films. Each reflects a willingness on the part of the filmmakers to say something genuinely uncomfortable. Sometimes the most dangerous forces in society are not the ones who look threatening. Sometimes they are the ones handing out awards at ribbon-cutting ceremonies. The theme of gentrification is equally pointed. The film shows us what happened to Reptile Ravine, the neighborhood that was once home to a vibrant reptile community after the expulsion. Each became Tundraton. Each was literally transformed into a frozen landscape, a climate zone that serves the wealthy, powerful mammals who moved in magic their own. The original residents did not just lose their homes. They lost their entire environment, their cultural geography, their physical home world. And the new residents built their mansions on top of the Terra Azul without ever having to acknowledge it. One review of the film noted that the movie draws on real-world gentrification data to make its gentrification has reshaped 15% of urban neighborhoods in the United States, with the impacts disproportionately falling on minority and lower-income communities. The film never lectures us with statistics, but it gives us something more powerful. It makes us see the process happen in real time, at a human scale, with characters we have come to love. Then there is the propaganda angle, which may be the film's most timely theme. After Garage Snake is spotted at the Centennial Gala, the news media in Zootopia goes into overdrive. Misinformation spreads like wildfire. The narrative is quickly shaped. A dangerous snake has attacked the city's most celebrated family. All snakes are threatening. All reptiles are suspect. The public, primed by generations of cultural conditioning to fear scales, accepts this narrative immediately. Even Judy, who is supposed to be the hero of the story, finds herself caught in the grip. This is the film's most chillingly relevant commentary. In an era where misinformation spreads through social media at speeds that make fact-checking feel futile, while single incidents are instantly generalized into sweeping narratives about entire comune, the film's depiction of how a city's entire worldview can be manipulated through a single strategically released story feels less like fantasy and more like journalism. One op-ed about the film observed that this portion of the narrative teaches young viewers and not so young viewers that propaganda works precisely because it feels true. It confirms existing fears. It arrives in familiar packaging. It comes from trusted sources. And by the time critical thinking has a chance to intervene, the damage has already been done. Where the film's social commentary is slightly less successful is its refusal to push all the way to the logical conclusions of its own arguments. The resolution: the Linkslays are arrested, the reptiles are welcomed back. Gary gets his party is emotionally satisfying but historically naive. Real gentrification is not undone by an arrest, a celebration. Real colonial erasure is not corrected by restoring one woman's name till the founding charter. The film gestures powerfully at the problem but offers a solution that is, by necessity, much simpler than the reality would require. Whether this is a failure of nerve or simply the practical limitation of producing a family film is a question worth sitting with. Let us talk about Judy and Nick, because any analysis of Zootopia 2 that does not spend substantial time on the emotional core of these two characters is missing the heart of the film entirely. Jennifer Goodwin has spoken in interviews about how returning to Judy Hopps after years of watching the original film with her own children gave her a deeper, more intuitive understanding of the character. You can hear it in the performance. This Judy is still the irrepressible optimist of the first film, is still the bunny who will throw herself at a problem until either the problem gives way or she does. But there is something slightly more worn around the edges of her enthusiasm now. She has won a major cause. She has proven herself against significant skepticism. Yet she still feels the need to prove herself constantly to her superiors, to her community, and perhaps most importantly, to herself. The film explores what happens when someone who has fought their whole life to be taken seriously gets a taste of being taken seriously and then cannot believe it is permanent. Judy's compulsion to charge ahead, to act on instinct, to solve the problem through sheer force of will, is simultaneously her greatest strength and the source of the friction in her partnership with Nick. She acts, Nick thinks, she trusts her gut, Nick trusts his experience. Neither of them is wrong. But they have not yet learned to trust each other completely. Nick Wilde, in Jason Bateman's hands, remains one of animated cinema's most compelling male characters. The former con artist who became a cop is not a simple redemption arc. The film understands that deeply. Nick's instinct for caution, his reading of situations before committing, his dry, deflecting humor when things get emotionally heavy. These are not quirks, they are survival mechanisms. A fox who grew up in a world that expected the worst from him learned early that you do not show your cards until you know you can afford to lose them. Becoming a cop changed his circumstances. Each did not automatically change the psychological armor he built over a lifetime. The partnership dynamic is the most consistently satisfying element of the film. Their arguments feel earned. Their reconciliation feels earned. The moment when Nick uses his quick thinking to get the Chivinal paid to a dying Judy, choosing her survival over his own safety without hesitation, lands as an emotional knockout precisely because Gary G. Snake, the new character at the center of the story, is a genuine creative achievement. Ke Huy Quan brings a kind of wounded dignity to the heart that the film desperately needed. Gary is not a victim, even though terrible things have been done to his family and his people. He is a person with a mission, a history, a sense of humor, a deep well of grief that occasionally breaks through his determination. His relationship with Judy and Nick, initially adversarial, gradually shifting toward alliance, ultimately becoming something close to friendship, is the emotional trogline that holds the plot too. What is particularly striking about Gary as a character is what his very existence represents within the world of the film. A snake in Zootopia is not just a narrative device, it is a statement. Every scene in which Gary is presenting the city, buying coffee, walking through a marketplace, talking to other animals, is quietly radical within the internal logic of the film's world. He is not supposed to be there. He is not supposed to exist as a visible, articulate, sympathetic presence. The fact that he does, that his existence cannot be easily dismissed or feared once you have seen him mourn his great-grandmother's stolen legacy, is the film's most elegant argument against it. You cannot feel what you have truly seen. The supporting cast adds texture throughout, with Fortune Feimster as Igor Beaver podcaster providing some of the film's most genuinely funny moments, while Chief Bog S. Gruff authority hiding a fundamental decency, Closet S. warm enthusiasm, Flash the Sloth S. magnificently languid presence grounding the world in familiar warmth. We need to spend some time on Paulbert, the Lixley family's youngest member, the film's most personally dangerous antagonist. Paulbert is introduced as an awkward, honest young lynx who seems genuinely uncomfortable with his family's wealth and status. He is helpful, he is friendly, he rescues Judy and Gary at a critical moment. He seems like the alive from within the insider who recognizes injustice and chooses the right side. The film lets us believe this for a significant portion of its runtime, and then he poisons Judy with snake venom, tosses Gary into the snow, and fights Nick with a cold efficiency that suggests his The betrayal works dramatically, but it also works thematically in a way that is worth unpacking. Paulbert represents something very specific, the beneficiary of stolen privilege who has convinced himself that he is one of the good ones. He has grown up knowing, on some level, that the Lixley family's wealth and status rest on a foundation of crime and azure. His awkwardness around that wealth is genuine. his discomfort is real. But when it comes to actually allowing the truth to come out, when it comes to allowing the stolen legacy to be reclaimed, the family to face consequences, he snaps back into the role of protector. This is not a one-dimensional villain story. This is a story about how privilege protects itself even through people who believe they oppose it. Albert's betrayal is the act of someone who wanted to be an ally right up until being an ally would have cost him something real. At that point, the armor of the establishment reasserted itself. It is a devastatingly true dynamic, and the film lands it without making it feel preachy. We are too shocked by the betrayal in the moment to step back and analyze it, which means the filmmakers have done their job correctly. The lesson arrives through feeling, not through explanation. One of Zootopia 2's most immediately pleasurable qualities is the sheer joy it takes in expanding the world we first encountered 9 years ago. The original film gave us a city of magnificent detailed neighborhoods designed around different climates, each with their own visual language and architectural identity. Zootopia 2 opens that world even wider. The Marsh Market, where Judy and Nick go undercover early in the film searching for leads on Gary's whereabouts, is a semi-aquatic neighborhood filled with characters and visual details that reward close attention. Every background is alive. Every corner has a story. The revelation of Reptile Ravine, now frozen over as part of Tundra Tour, is one of the film's most visually striking moments. When the characters first glimpse what remains of the original reptile settlement beneath the ice and snow, there is something genuinely haunting about it. The architecture of a displaced community preserved deep permafrost, hidden beneath the gleaming wealth of the mammal neighborhoods that replaced it. Each is gorgeous and heartbreaking simultaneously. Each is the kind of visual storytelling that does not require a single word of dialogue. The weather walls themselves become central plot devices in a way that the original film only touched on. In this is clever structural work. In the first film, the weather walls were simply a feature of the world, an explanation for how the city's diverse climatic neighborhoods could coexist. In the sequel, they become the site of the climax and the symbol of the central injustice. The technology that was supposed to enable coexistence was itself built on the erasure of the community that invented it. You cannot separate the miracle from the crime that made it possible. Director Jared Bush has spoken about his desire to use the sequel to show audiences previously unexplored corners of Zootopia, and he delivers on that promise. The film does not just revisit familiar locations, it actively expands the geography of our world that already felt rich and inhabited. This is the kind of world building that justifies making a sequel, not just more of the same, but genuinely more. Let us talk briefly about what you actually see on screen, because Zootopia 2 is a genuinely beautiful film in ways that deserve acknowledgement. 9 years of advances in animation technology are apparent in every frame. The full simulation is extraordinary. Each of the hundreds of thousands of individual hairs on Judy Hopps movies reacts with a physical authenticity that would have been computationally impossible at the time of the original film. The water effects in the Marsh Market sequences are breathtaking. The snow in Tundra Tour has a texture and light scattering quality that makes you feel slightly cold watching it. The cityscapes, from extreme wide shots to intimate close-ups, maintain a visual coherence and detail density that is genuinely staggering to contemplate when you think about the labor it represents. But beyond the technical achievements, the animation serves the story in the most fundamental way. The characters' faces are capable of extraordinary emotional nuance. The moment when Gary realizes that Judy and Nick are genuinely willing to believe him, genuinely willing to listen to his great-grandmother's story is communicated entirely through tiny shifts in his expression. The way his guard lowers, fraction by fraction, is a performance that Rui Kwan delivers through his voice, but that the animation team makes visible in ways that amplify everything the voice comum. This is the gift of great animation. It does not merely illustrate the story, it deepens it. One review aptly describes Zootopia 2 as a breath of fresh air in a dominated industry, noting that the film represents what handcrafted, painstakingly detailed human artistry looks like when given the time, resources, and creative freedom to fully realize its vision. In an era when audiences are increasingly aware of and suspicious about the role of artificial intelligence in creative production, a film that's evidently made by human hands, human minds, and human hearts carries an additional weight. A critical analysis of Zootopia 2 that ignores the music is an incomplete analysis, because the original film Try Everything was not merely a catchy song. It was a thematic statement embedded in pop music form, an anthem of persistence for anyone who had ever been told that someone like them could not succeed at something like this. Shakira returns as Gazelle, Zootopia's beloved pop star, and the film includes at least one major musical moment that multiple reviewers flagged as one of the sequel's strongest elements. The new song titled Zoo is by several accounts even stronger than Try Everything, which is a significant claim. One IMDb reviewer wrote that it is genuinely better, a musical piece that deepens the themes of the film while functioning as an independent pop achievement. Whether Zoo will have the cultural staying power of Try Everything remains to be seen. Measuring a song's longevity requires time. But the fact that the music was noticed and praised by critics and audiences alike suggests that the filmmakers understood what they had in the original film's musical legacy and worked seriously to agar. The film's instrumental score also deserves mention. Where the first film's score drew heavily on jazzy, big city texture still established Zootopia as a living organism, the sequel's score expands into more diverse musical territories including text, community's cultural identity, giving the reptile ravine sequences an emotional resonance that the visuals alone could not fully carry. We have been spending a lot of time on what Zootopia 2 does well, each does a great deal well. But a critical analysis that ignores the film's weaknesses is not criticism, it is celebration. And while Zootopia 2 deserves celebration, it also deserves honesty. The most frequently cited structural problem with the film is its reliance on a tired storytelling device, the heroes being repeatedly misidentified as criminals and chased by law enforcement despite the fact that they are the law enforcement. This happens multiple times. Judy and Nick, who are the police officers, spend a significant portion of the film being pursued as fugitives by their own colleagues. The first instance generates genuine tension. By the third or fourth instance, it has become a crutch, a way of manufacturing conflict without doing the harder work of generating conflict from the character's own choices and psychology. This is not a small problem. It is a sign of a script that occasionally confuses motion with momentum. Judy and Nick running from their own department is exciting on the surface, but it does not deepen our understanding of the characters. It does not force them to grow. It is, in the most technical sense, a plot convenience, a way of keeping them outside the institutional structures that would otherwise constrain the story's movement. One IMDb reviewer put it succinctly: The movie repeatedly relies on a tired trope where the police misunderstand and chase the protagonists, even though Judy and Nick are the police officers themselves. This happens multiple times and completely breaks the internal logic of the story. There is a version of this film that resolves the same narrative problems by making Judy and Nick conflict with TH. Marty principled about the department's institutional resistance to hearing the truth about the Linkslays, for instance, or about the way law enforcement has historically been complicit in the very gentrification and displacement the film is critiquing. That version would have been bolder and more thematically consistent. Zootopia 2 not kit make it tell that version. The pacing is also occasionally uneven. Several reviewers noted that the film sagged somewhat in its middle act, and some young children reportedly lost interest midway through. For a film that is handling genuinely complex ideas colonial erasure, historical propaganda, the mechanics of institutional prejudice, the challenge of maintaining child-friendly momentum while doing justice to adult themes is enormous. The first Zootopia navigated the challenge with more consistent grace. The sequel does not always find the right balance. The villain Tom Palbert's betrayal arrives with considerable dramatic impact, but perhaps not kit enough narrative foreshadowing. The filmmakers clearly knew what they were building toward, but there are the moments in the second act where Palbert's helpful persona feels more like a plot necessity than a genuinely motivated characterization. A slightly longer middle act that gave Palbert more visible interiority moments, where we might catch a glimpse of the calculation beneath the awkwardness, would have made his tone land with even Guerre. In the resolution, while emotionally satisfying, is as noted earlier somewhat too neat for the size of the injustice it is addressing. Arresting the Linkslays in Rodia Party for Gary does not give back generations of stolen history, does not undo the economic displacement of an entire community, does not address the fact that Zootopia's entire civic identity is built on a lie. The film gestures at these realities throughout its runtime but ultimately resolves them with a gesture rather than a reckoning. This is perhaps the inevitable price of making a family film. The audience needs hope. The ending needs to feel like something was won. But each is worth noting that the most powerful moments in the film are the ones where each does not offer comfort, where each simply shows us the frozen ruins of Reptile Ravine. He lets the weight of that image rest on us without rushing to reassurance. The question that will define Zootopia 2's legacy is unavoidable. How does it compare to the original? The honest answer is, it is excellent, but it is not kit at the same level. The original Zootopia had an extraordinary quality that is almost impossible to manufacture intentionally. The quality of surprise. No one expected it to be as good as it was. No one expected a Disney animated film about anthropomorphic animals in a buddy cop setting to deliver one of the most sophisticated explorations of systemic bias and institutional prejudice in mainstream popular culture. The surprise was part of the impact. The delight of discovery was baked into the experience. Zootopia 2 could not have that quality. It arrives pre-expected to be meaningful, pre-expected to be ambitious, pre-expected to deliver social commentary with emotional depth and visual splendor. That expectation is both an advantage. It attracts audiences who are specifically seeking those qualities, and a disadvantage. It means the film can never produce the gasp of surprise that the first film's allegory for racial prejudice, while executed beautifully, operated primarily at the level of individual bias, how individuals carry and act on prejudice, and how individuals can challenge and change those patterns. The sequel operates at a systemic level. It is about how entire institutions, entire historical narratives, entire cities can be built on the foundation of injustice. And how dismantling that foundation requires not just individual but collective confrontation of uncomfortable truths. That is a bigger, harder, more dangerous argument. The first film said, "You might be more prejudiced than you think. You can do better." The sequel says, "The systems you live within were built on stolen labor, erased histories, and that does not disappear just because the generation that incurred it is gone." These are not equivalent arguments. The sequel's argument is more structurally radical, even if it is packaged in a gentler resolution. Some critics have also argued that Gary the Snake is a more complex and emotionally rich character than the first film's antagonist, Dawn Bellwether. While Bellwether was a genuinely satisfying villain, the most dangerous kind, the one you genuinely like before the reveal she was ultimately defined by her villainy, Gary is not a villain at all. He is a protagonist in his own right. A character whose story of seeking justice for a stolen legacy could carry its own film. The fact that he shares the screen with Judy and Nick enriches all three characters rather than diminishing any of them, where the original remains superior is in its tightness. The first film's script is a nearly perfect mystery thriller structure that also functions as a perfect social allegory. The mechanics of the plot and the mechanics of the theme reinforce each other at every turn. Zootopia 2 is looser, more ambitious in scope but less precise in execution. It is trying to do more and therefore achieves its peaks higher while also experiencing its valleys lower. Films do not exist in a vacuum. They are imagined by people living in specific historical moments, and they are received by audiences living in those same moments. Zootopia 2 was released in November 2025, and understanding what that means requires briefly acknowledging the world it arrived into. 2025 is still put it diplomatically a complicated year. Issues of gentrification and housing displacement were reaching crisis levels in cities across the globe. Conversations about historical erasure and the repatriation of stolen cultural legacy were generating significant cultural debate. The mechanics of propaganda and misinformation, accelerated by social media algorithmic amplification, were reshaping public discourse in ways that felt genuinely frightening to many people, and they always present tensions around racial identity, class privilege, and the distribution of power and resources were, if anything, more visible and more contested than they had been in years. Aimed at children and their parents that had the audacity to tell a story about colonial theft, historical propaganda, the gentrification of minority neighborhoods, and the way establishment families protect stolen privilege through generations. Each told that story with intelligence, emotional warmth, genuine humor, and an animation quality that made it gorgeous to look at throughout. One analysis of the film observed that it arrived into culture works that engaged explicitly with themes of genocide, displacement, and the political uses of historical narrative, noting that no part of pop culture is safe from this cultural reckoning. Whether this constitutes a genuine shift in how mainstream entertainment engages with these themes, or simply a cycle that will pass, is impossible to say. But the fact that a film this structurally radical in its social critique could gross over $159 billion globally is not a small data point. Something in the story resonated with enormous numbers of people. Children who sat in those theaters across the Thanksgiving holiday weekend in 2025 saw, perhaps for the first time, A story that named gentrification, named each, depicted each, showed them what each looks like when a community is pushed out of its home by forces with mighty power and a willingness to use it. They saw what each looks like when a single incident is weaponized as propaganda against an entire community. They saw what happens when the historical record is falsified to protect those in power. These are not small things to learn, even especially in animated form. One element of Zootopia 2 that has received somewhat less critical attention but deserves acknowledgement is the film's treatment of emotional health and the value of therapy. Chief Bogo de Groff, no Nonsense Police Captain voiced by Idris Elba with his characteristic combination of authority and unexpected warmth, delivers an instruction only in the film that funked you. Judy and Nick must go to therapy to address their communication issues, or they cannot continue as officers. A family film aimed in part at children, this is a meaningful moment. Therapy is framed not as a sign of weakness or dysfunction, but as a professional requirement for people who are doing important, emotionally demanding work and who have recognized that their personal patterns are getting in the way of their effectiveness. The idea that strong, capable people go to therapy, that seeking help with your emotional patterns is part of being a competent professional rather than a departure from each, is a value statement. Several reviewers noted that the film also touches on childhood trauma and personality disorders and the treatment of Nick's characterization, the way his experience of being betrayed and rejected as a young fox shaped the defensive patterns that show up in his adult partnership with Judy. This is handled with appropriate subtlety. The film does not become a therapy session itself, but the awareness is there, each enriches Nick as a character considerably. Zootopia 2 earned over $159 billion globally as of the time this script was written. It debuted with $556 million in its opening weekend alone, a number that represents one of the largest animated film openings in history. It recouped its entire production budget within 48 hours of release. These numbers mean something. They mean that enormous numbers of people chose to spend money in time on this film, that the story resonated widely across cultures and demographics, and that the investment is ambitious, thoughtful. But box office numbers are also a dangerously incomplete measure of a film's quality or cultural value. Some of the most important films ever made were commercial failures at release. Some of the highest grossing films of all time are not particularly good. The correlation between financial success and artistic achievement is real but weak, strong enough to be worth noting, too weak to be worth over-relying on. What the box office numbers tell us about Zootopia 2 is that it was widely seen. What we need to ask, what a critical analysis exists to ask, is what those audiences were seeing, and whether the film they were seeing was as good as it could have been. The answer, as we have argued throughout this analysis, is largely yes. Not perfectly, not without stumbles, not without moments where commercial necessity or narrative convenience won out over bolder choices, but largely yes. Zootopia 2 is a film that takes its audience, children and adults alike, seriously enough to challenge them. That is rarer than it should be. Well, does Zootopia go for Maddie? The film ends in a way that is ambiguously hopeful but also genuinely OP. Judy and Nick pursue escaped criminals. The city welcomes reptiles. Gary's great-grandmother is honored. Relationships have been repaired and deepened. But the world is larger than it was at the start of the film. The revelation that Zootopia's founding story was built on injustice has changed the city's self-understanding in ways that a single party cannot fully address. There is more to story, Eddie. There is a Zootopia that must now grapple, at an institutional and civic level, with what it means that its most celebrated founding family were thieves and murderers. There are the reptile communities that must be reintegrated into a city that was built without the me mind literally, architecturally. The weather walls in neighborhood designs that exist were not conceived with reptile needs as part of the equation. There are the questions of reparation and restitution that the film raises. It then steps back from that a potential third film could engage with Marty directly. Whether Disney will make a third film, and whether it will be as ambitious as this one, is impossible to predict. The financial success of Zootopia 2 makes a third film likely. Whether the creative team has the courage and the mandate to go even further is another question. What Zootopia 2 has proven is that there is appetite, enormous, global, multigenerational appetite. Condescend to its audience, that engages with real social complexity through delays of imagination, and that trusts children and adults alike to handle difficult truths when those truths are delivered with warmth, humor, a genuine artistic craft, that is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. So where do we land? Zootopia 2 is a very good film. It is brave in its social commentary, honesty its portrayal of how injustice perpetuates itself through institutions, a histories, emotionally generous with its characters, visually magnificent, and more often than not genuinely moving. It is a film that owns its emotional climaxes because it does the working character, in theme, world building to make those climaxes feel like the natural arrival point of a journey that has been honestly, carefully taken. It is not kitsch the original. It could not be, expecting it to be would be unreasonable. The original had the gift of surprising the precision of a tightly focused script. The sequel has ambition in scoring the courage to say harder things. But it also has the scenes that often comes with greater ambition, and the occasional structural shortcuts that suggest a prod. What each is perhaps most importantly is necessary. A cultural moment that desperately needs voices willing to name the mechanisms of injustice clearly, to make the invisible visible, to tell the stories of those who have been erased and to demand that their names be restored. Zootopia 2 is doing that work. It is doing it in the most visible, widely accessible format possible. It is doing it for children who have not yet been taught to look away, and for adults who perhaps need the reminder that looking away is a choice. Garage Snake's great-grandmother Agnes built something extraordinary, and the people power stole it, hid it, and built their legacy on Hoerazuri. The film does not let that slide. It demands acknowledgement. It demands restoration. And it does so in the language of a family film, in the language of adventure and humor, in friendship and love, because those are the languages that reach the most people. In reaching people is always where change begins. Agnes the Snake built the weather walls. Let the record show it.